If you are currently, or maybe you've ever been, a caregiver for someone living with dementia, you probably know that feeling. Late afternoon.
Mm.
It's when the clock hits maybe, I don't know, 4:13 or 5 p.m., and the whole energy shifts, and you find yourself sort of bracing for what's next.
Yeah, that witching hour, as some people call it.
Exactly. Clinically, we call it sundowning, right?
Yeah.
This period of what seems like random restlessness, maybe increased agitation, sometimes profound confusion that seems to hit just as the light starts to fade.
It can be really intense.
And for too long, this has been treated like some kind of mystery, or maybe just an inevitable symptom that you just have to endure.
Right, like there's nothing you can really do.
But today, we're doing a deep dive. We're looking at sources grounded in behavioral gerontology and applied behavior analysis, ABA.
Okay.
And these behavioral researchers, they suggest something different. That evening agitation isn't random at all. It's actually a predictable behavioral cycle
A cycle. How so?
fueled by subtle environmental changes, things we can actually learn to map and maybe manage.
Oh.
Our mission today is really to unpack this. The idea is agitation is communication. And if we can decode the environmental patterns, maybe we can start engineering calm. This isn't random, it's patterned.
That's a powerful starting point. And what's fascinating when you look at the science is the physical foundation for this pattern.
Okay.
As natural daylight starts to decrease, the brain is undergoing this huge transition. For, a healthy person, our internal clock, the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, it's incredibly responsive to those light changes, keeps our circadian rhythms smooth.
Like, keeps us on track.
Exactly. But in someone with dementia, that SCN is compromised. It's just less able to smoothly interpret the fading light.
So the signal gets scrambled.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
When the environment changes, less light, maybe more shadows, the brain gets these scrambled messages. So from a behavioral science view, this evening agitation is really the product of antecedent changes.
Antecedent changes. So cues in the environment.
Cues in the environment that the brain just can't decode smoothly anymore. And this results in, intense confusion, what our sources actually call a storm of uncertainty.
A storm of uncertainty. Wow. And it's fueled by things most of us wouldn't even notice, right?
Precisely.
Let's dig into those environmental triggers then. Because it sounds like it's a compounding effect. Lots of small sensory shifts adding up.
That's a great way to put it. Think about what actually happens late in the day.
Okay.
Shadows get longer, they deepen. For someone whose visual processing might already be struggling, those shadows can become distorted. They might increase confusion, sometimes even trigger paranoia.
I could see that. And then there were the routines changing too.
Absolutely. Caregivers might be cleaning up, starting dinner prep, maybe there's a shift change happening. All these actions signal that transitions are coming.
Right.
And if the person can't easily access their memory to understand what's next, well, anxiety spikes.
And dinner prep itself adds more stimulation. Smells, noise.
Exactly. Smells, maybe clattering pans, more motion in the room. And this all hits right when fatigue is usually setting in, lowering their tolerance for any kind of ambiguity or overstimulation.
That accumulation is key then. You mentioned an example, Mr. T.
Yes, a really telling real-world example. Mr. T's son apparently dreaded 6 p.m. Absolutely dreaded it.
Why 6 p.m. specifically?
Because that's when Mr. T would become convinced his son was stealing his money or hiding things from him. And the specific trigger identified was once the news comes on.
So not just the darkness, but the TV news.
Right. It was the darkness plus the fast-paced, often loud, visually stimulating nature of the evening news. It was too much input layered together.
Okay, that makes sense. So when that anxiety hits and triggers an outburst agitation, questioning, maybe paranoia like Mr. T's, what happens next in this cycle?
That's where what the researchers call the loop of disorientation kicks in. The person acts out their confusion or fear, and the standard, very understandable, compassionate caregiver reaction is often to respond emotionally. Pleading with them, trying to correct their misconception, explaining the situation logically.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that even trying to comfort them or explain things, that can actually make it worse? That sounds incredibly hard.
It is incredibly hard,
Yep.
especially for a tired, loving caregiver in that moment, but that's the critical behavioral pivot point.
Okay.
Our natural, often high-emotion response, however well-intentioned it is, can unintentionally function as a positive reinforcer for the behavior we want to stop.
Reinforcer. How?
Well, think about it. When the person is agitated, what are they often seeking, even if unconsciously? attention, connection, maybe reassurance.
Right. They're distressed.
Exactly. And if the caregiver meets that outburst with intense emotional energy, even if it's concerned energy, the behavior just got the desired reaction. It got attention, so it gets reinforced.
Oh, I see. So the intensity matters.
It does. The core principle here is shifting perspective. If we treat the agitation like disobedience or irrationality, we often escalate the conflict. But if we decode it as communication, a signal of unmet need or confusion, we can start to respond more skillfully.
Okay, so the key isn't stopping the outburst midstream necessarily, but mapping the pattern that leads to it consistently.
Precisely. And that brings us squarely to step 1 in this behavioral approach. Find the antecedent.
The trigger.
The trigger, yes. And this starts with detailed, objective observation. Not trying to fix it yet, just watching.
And the tool for this is the ABC log you mentioned.
That's right, a simple log. Antecedent, what happened right before. Behavior, what exactly did the person do. Consequence, what happened immediately after.
And the power of this is clarity.
Huge clarity. It transforms that vague, overwhelming feeling, he's always upset in the evening, into precise, actionable information. Like, he begins pacing rapidly back and forth whenever the overhead kitchen light is turned on, about 30 minutes before we start making dinner. See the difference?
Yeah, that's specific, actionable, you know when and what. Here's where it gets really interesting.
It really is, because that level of detail is basically the blueprint for creating calm. Once you know the precise timing and nature of the environmental shift, the antecedent, you can move to step 2.
Which is?
Restructure the environment through what's called antecedent manipulation.
Okay, antecedent manipulation. Sounds technical, but what does it mean in practice?
It's actually pretty straightforward. It just means we change the situation before the challenging behavior even starts.
Proactive.
Exactly.
Huh.
The goal is to remove or significantly reduce the known trial proactively. We're engineering a calm state instead of constantly reacting to a panicked one.
Okay, so what are some of the most effective ways to actually do that? What do the sources highlight?
Number 1, without a doubt, is light consistency. This is huge.
Okay.
You absolutely must manage the light transition smoothly. This means closing curtains or blinds before dusk truly sets in, turning on soft, warm lamps well before the natural light fades significantly.
So, preventing those deep shadows from forming in the first place.
Precisely. Prevent the shadow distortion and the visual confusion it causes. And critically, avoid blue light sources in the evening.
Like tablets, phones, bright overhead fluorescence.
Yes, all of those. Switch entirely to warm, sort of yellow-toned lighting. It's much easier on the brain, especially a brain struggling with processing.
Makes sense. What else besides light?
Second big one, predictable cues. Since memory is often failing, we can't rely on the person's internal clock or memory of the routine.
So you provide external cues instead.
Exactly. You replace reliance on internal rhythm with external, reliable cues. This means announcing transitions clearly, calmly, and well in advance.
So instead of just starting dinner prep.
Right. Instead of just letting things happen around them, you might say something like, it's 4:30 now. In about half an hour, we'll finish folding these towels and then get cozy before we think about dinner. Give them that roadmap.
And maintaining familiarity, does that play a role?
Yes, good point. Environmental familiarity. Avoid rearranging furniture or changing decor, especially later in the day. Keep the pathways clear and the setting predictable.
Okay. And maybe scheduling calming activities.
Definitely. Scheduling simple, low-demand, familiar activities during that vulnerable late afternoon period can be very effective. Things like folding towels together, listening to quiet, familiar music, maybe having a cup of herbal tea, low stimulation, high predictability.
Let's circle back for a second. You said something really important earlier that ABA, this approach, doesn't depend on memory. It depends on the environment.
Yes, that's a crucial distinction.
Can you expand on why that's so powerful for dementia care?
Absolutely. The reason these techniques, which come from applied behavior analysis, work so well even when cognitive function is severely impaired, is that we are essentially bypassing the need for the person to remember or reason their way through the situation.
Okay.
We're not asking them to recall the evening routine or logically think, oh, it's just shadows, I shouldn't be scared. That capacity might be gone.
Right.
Instead, we are designing the environment so meticulously, so consistently, that the desired behavior, calmness, relaxation, maybe gentle participation, becomes the path of least resistance. The environment itself holds the routine for them.
Wow. So you design an environment where calm is almost the default setting.
That's the goal. You
Mhm.
engineer calm. It makes the process sound less like therapy and more like, as you said, interior design for the brain.
Huh. I like that. Okay, let's move to the interaction piece. This often feels like the hardest part for caregivers. Step 3 is change the caregiver's response or consequence control.
Yes. Managing the consequence.
We already touched on this, that common mistake of meeting agitation with that high emotional energy.
Right, which unintentionally rewards the behavior.
So the behavioral secret here is what? Starve the negative behavior.
Essentially, yes. Starve the negative behavior of the high-energy emotional fuel it seeks. This doesn't mean ignore the person, not at all. It means controlling your own response.
Mastering redirection, not confrontation. Can you give an example? Maybe with that Mrs. D you mentioned, the one who paces.
Sure. Let's say Mrs. D starts pacing restlessly around 5:15 p.m. The old, maybe instinctive, confrontational response might be, Mom, sit down. You're just going to tire yourself out. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah, I can hear a stressed caregiver saying that. And the likely result.
Probably increased anxiety for Mrs. D, maybe resistance, a battle of wills. It escalates things.
Okay, so the new behavioral response,
Mm.
using consequence control.
The alternative is redirection, giving the behavior a purpose while keeping your own energy calm and low. You might say, very gently, it looks like you feel like walking. That's okay. Hey, I could use some help. Let's walk over here and straighten the magazines on this table together.
Joining her rather than stopping her.
Exactly. Or maybe you've got good energy for walking. How about we walk to the kitchen together and I'll put the kettle on for some tea? You validate the impulse to move, but redirect it into something purposeful and shared.
So the underlying idea is behavior doesn't just vanish, it transforms.
Precisely. We're trading that aimless, anxiety-fueled pacing for adaptive, purposeful movement. You're not trying to extinguish the energy, you're channeling it.
So you're not ignoring the pacing, you're just changing the fuel source from anxiety to purpose.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
That leads directly to step 4, which you said is often missed. Reinforce the calm.
Yes, absolutely critical and so often overlooked. If you've successfully manipulated the antecedents, managed your response, and redirected the energy into something calmer or more purposeful, maybe she is now sitting quietly looking at a book or helping you fold laundry calmly, you must acknowledge and reinforce that positive behavior.
How specifically?
This is the moment for quiet, positive, low-energy praise and attention. Connect the calm behavior with a feeling of reward.
So you might say.
You might say something like, you found such a nice quiet spot by the window. That looks like a lovely way to relax after a busy afternoon. Or, thank you so much for helping me with these towels. You're always so good at folding. Wow. Be specific. Name the calm behavior you want to see more of.
You're cementing that connection. This calm activity brings pleasant attention.
Exactly. You're gently shaping behavior towards calmness by making it rewarding.
Oh, okay. I can definitely see how this 4-step process, find the trailer, change the setting, change your response, reinforce the calm, could work. But wow, I can also imagine how exhausting this level of consistency must be for a caregiver who's probably already running on fumes by 5 p.m.
That is the absolute truth and the most human and critical question. The consistency is, without doubt, the biggest challenge.
So how do the sources address that? How do you maintain this calm, low-energy response when the person you love might be yelling or suspicious or crying?
It's tough. Behavioral analysts are very clear. This requires planning and support. If possible, caregivers should tag team, take breaks.
Okay.
They also suggest implementing something like a 15-minute rule for yourself. If you feel your own emotional energy starting to rise, if you feel yourself about to react emotionally, have a planned escape. A brief one. Excuse yourself calmly. Say something neutral, like, oh, I just need to check something. Or, I'll be right back with a glass of water for us. Step away for a minute or two, take some deep breaths, reset your own energy, and then return calmly.
Consistency, not perfection.
That's the mantra. Consistency, not perfection. And here's the really encouraging part. The sources consistently indicate that you usually start seeing results. Noticeable reductions in the duration, the frequency, the intensity of the agitation within about 2 weeks.
2 weeks. That's actually really fast.
Yeah.
That offers a lot of hope.
It really does. It shows that the environment has a powerful and relatively immediate effect when changed systematically.
Okay, let's try to summarize the kind of behavioral routine that emerges from all this data. It's like building a fortress of predictability around the person, right?
That's a good way to think about it. The calm, predictable fortress.
It starts with that anchor, light lamps on before sunset, always warm tones.
Yes.
Then predictable transitions, announced gently, well in advance, using those verbal cues. And critically, reduce stimulation. The sources seem really firm on this.
Yeah.
Avoid things like TV news, loud or fast music, lots of people coming and going, especially after that vulnerable time kicks in.
Absolutely. The cognitive processing load is just too high during that period. Simplify the sensory input.
And this framework, this understanding, helps us tell the difference between, say, generalized anxiety and actual sundowning.
It does. While they definitely overlap, sundowning often involves anxiety in the side. Sundowning is specifically situational anxiety. It's triggered by the predictable environmental changes associated with the time of day. It has that schedule because the setting itself is acting as the trigger.
Got it. Now, a question that always comes up, medication. We hear a lot about medication for sundowning. Where do these behavioral strategies fit in relation to that?
Behavioral strategy should always be the first line of defense. That's the strong consensus in behavioral gerontology.
Why first?
Because often, by creating environmental consistency and using strategic redirection, you can significantly reduce or sometimes even eliminate the need for psychoactive medications for these specific behaviors.
So fix the environment first.
Fix the environment first. It might resolve the symptom or lessen it dramatically, making medication unnecessary or allowing for lower doses if still needed for other reasons. It's about the least restrictive, most empowering approach first.
What about those really difficult behaviors like the suspicion and paranoia we saw with Mr. T, thinking his son was hiding money? How does this approach address that?
Paranoia in this context is often at its root a cognitive misinterpretation. It's triggered or certainly exacerbated by that combination of low light, shadows, and intense fatigue.
So the environmental fixes help.
They often help significantly. When you address the environment first, boost the light levels appropriately, reduce confusing auditory stimulation like the TV news, ensure the person isn't overly fatigued, it can naturally soften those paranoid thoughts because the perceptual triggers are reduced.
And the interaction piece. If someone says something paranoid,
The guiding principle remains validation over correction. Correction almost always adds confrontation. It forces the person to defend a reality that feels true to them, even if it's not objectively true. And it can damage trust and dignity.
whereas validation,
Validation acknowledges the feeling behind the statement, even if you don't agree with the content. You might say, "It sounds like you're feeling worried about your money right now," rather than, "No one is stealing your money." Then gently redirect. "Your wallet is right here. Let's put it somewhere safe together, and then maybe we can listen to some music."
preserve dignity, maintain calm, redirect gently.
That's the essence of it. Reinforce peace and connection, not conflict.
So what does this all mean? Taking this deep dive, looking at sundowning through this behavioral lens, what's the big takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway is empowerment. For too long, caregivers felt helpless in the face of sundowning. This approach shows that late-day agitation isn't some abstract, inevitable decline. It's often a specific behavioral event strongly tied to the environment, the daily rhythm, and our human interactions.
And by systematically adjusting things, light, language, routine, we're essentially giving back predictability to a world that, for the person with dementia, no longer provides it naturally.
Exactly. Where traditional medicine might primarily see irreversible confusion, behavioral science gives us this incredibly useful lens to see clear, understandable patterns we can work with.
It shifts the focus from fixing the person to fixing the environment around the person.
Precisely. It restores a sense of agency, not just for the person living with dementia, but crucially for the caregiver, too. It gives them a map and a practical method.
It reframes the whole thing.
It really does. We often assume, that sustained calm has to come from within, that people need to manage their own feelings. But for those living with dementia, especially during these vulnerable times, calm often needs to be constructed around them. It needs to come from the outside in. Every consistent cue, every warm lamp turned on early, every gentle redirection, it all becomes part of what you might call the architecture of reassurance.
The architecture of reassurance. I love that phrase.
When the environment becomes steady, predictable, safe, that's when the core person often reappears. You see them become softer, steadier. They feel seen, not just managed. This is really what happens when compassion meets systematic, thoughtful design. It's kindness translated into action.